we tour, write a record, all while, when the second you get home, you maybe take a day to, catch up, and then you go right back to work. So it's just constant. So it's almost like one of those things where you wake up and all of a sudden it's how many years later, and you're like, oh, well, it's just forward momentum. You always have something to do.
Ghost Cult Magazine welcomes in Josh from Cattle Decapitation. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for having me.
Good, man. It's nice to see you again. You've been in Cattle Decap for 20 years. What is it that makes you want to stay?
I just think I've been in bands since I was, 15 years old or something like that. So I joined Cattle when I was 26, I think. And it's been 21 years in the band. I don't know, at the time I joined the band, it was just like all the bands I was in previous had just split up kind of coincidentally at the same time. And I was still in Chicago at that time, and Cattle's San Diego based. So a couple of the former members were like, "Oh, you should move out to San Diego, and we could start a band together." And at that time in my life, I was mid-20s or whatever. I had nothing kind of really holding me down. So I'm like, okay, cool, let's do this, move cross country. And so I did. I never started that side band with him, but Cattle needed a second guitar player at that time. Well, I auditioned for a while, and then I didn't hear from him for a while, and then they called me back for a second one, whatever, and then I joined. But at the same time, the original guitar player, one of the founders of the band, Gabe Serbian, he was in Locust, and they were starting to get super popular and very, very busy. And so he kind of, within 2 weeks of me being in the band, he kind of called a band meeting and said, guys, sorry. He's like, it broke his heart to tell us this, but he was just like, I'm going to hand over the reins to this guy because I'm never going to be around, and I don't want to hold you guys back. Because at that time, especially, there was label interest, obviously Metal Blade, which we've been with, but there was another couple labels that were, send us contracts and everything. So it was like, I could tell you guys are going to get busy, and I don't want to be the person to, hold everyone back. So here's this guy, that I'd known him for years, prior to that. So, I joined up, and we just basically started working and haven't stopped. We spent so much time on the road, probably I'd say 2003 to maybe 2008 or 9, that it's like I didn't have time to think. We tour, write a record, all while, when the second you get home, you maybe take a day to, catch up, and then you go right back to work. So it's just constant. So it's almost like one of those things where you wake up and all of a sudden it's how many years later, and you're like, oh, well, it's just forward momentum. You always have something to do. And I think I've been able to, just as a creative and emotional outlet, and just be involved in music. I just enjoy that. So Cattle's a great sort of outlet vehicle for that. So I've just been fortunate to be able to still be here 21 years later and doing it, and looking forward to the future. Beyond the current album, touring, and more beyond that. So I never thought, I wouldn't imagine that how many years ago, expecting to be right, here talking about this, at how many albums in with, a band I joined just out of oh, you should join our band. Okay. So it's just kind of a weird situation to be in.
Yeah. Now you're the longest running member. So the Cattle sound has become your sound.
Yeah. It's aside from Travis's, aside from Travis, it's just him and I. Dave McGraw's been in the band since 2008 or 9, so he's had a long run. But it's I've all the albums that are kind of people identify us by, or at least associate. I had a big part to play in those. So it's I guess, for better or for worse, my style is kind of imparted itself there, or kind of evolved within how the band is, our momentum, and because we've had some members come and go, and it's what influence did they bring, and what do I take from them and positively get from their sort of styles. It's this thing, and you can hear it evolve. The earlier stuff is just more grind, and then it gets a little more techy and complicated, and then it becomes a more streamlined, tighter songwriting. And then now the past couple records, especially, it's been a lot more, it's guitar wise, at least for me, just a lot more textured and atmospheric kind of stuff.
That's what I've noticed. Yes,
Yeah.
there's no, I don't want to say it's dead space, but there's like no dead, there's a lot of, yeah, you're right. Atmosphere is the perfect word for it, because every minute, even the quiet parts, it's just full. And
Yeah, that's what I
there's
wanted
like
to have.
some like underlying layers of something going on. It may not be like
Yeah.
super technical, but it's just some kind of just strumming or something easy underneath.
Yeah, it's something that just adds like texture and feel, and like there's always something, you know what I mean? And I wanted to like almost have a just like it's sort of like a sort of like a movie soundtrack, you know, where you have these like sort of really dramatic like crescendos and decrescendos, where these like almost like bowed strings, where it's just like very ominous. I just wanted to. Why would you not want to have that, or at least have that as a tool that you could bring in on, you know, extreme metal songs, you know, where it's not super symphonic and tippy toe and, you know, you know. I mean, that's cool. There's some bands I like that, but just, you know, this is just more just dread. but there's some, I mean, not all just, you know, super, I mean, there is that, but there's also these, you know, kind of mournful, sad, open parts that are more like reflective and thoughtful, I guess you could say, and not just horrible, you know, bludgeoning, you know. So it's like I try to have both those elements, you know, there. So it just adds to the variety of, you know, emotions you can have from any riff or any part in the song. It's like it's to me, it's like if you can't, it's just it works to your advantage to have all those tools if you can use them, you know, have them available to you.
Yeah, I find you and Bellicero, you guys complement each other very well. And I've seen Cattle the few times with one guitar player, with two. So definitely, yeah, it's definitely a two guitar band, and you guys are very complimentary of each other.
Yeah, I think
how'd you grab him?
He actually from the practice space, strangely enough, like I don't think they're active anymore. Because like the members of some moved away, some have like families now or whatever. But he was in a band called Eucharist in San Diego, and they were actually he was friends with they were friends with our former bass player first. I didn't know those guys. And I think we got to a point where we were practicing. It's the same space we have now, actually, but we needed a band to share a practice space with. And it was like, oh, I know these guys. I mean, they're looking for a spot. Okay, cool. So they moved into our space, and we were actually shared a practice space for like a year and a half, 2 years before, you know, he even played with us or at the first time. So, you know, they were still active, but kind of winding down on their, you know, like they did a little touring, you know, they have a couple CDs they put out. But then we kind of like asked them, we're like, oh, hey, would you like to fill in? Just like we did it as just a live thing first for like, I think starting in 2016. 2016, it was like, you want to just be our live second guitar player? I was like, yeah, sure. It's like, you can tour, you can do this, you know, whatever. So for a couple of years, it was just that. It was just live only kind of thing. And then he joined as a full-time member in 2018. So he was there for writing of Death Atlas, and then of course the current record, you know, too. So it kind of, you know, I was used to doing everything up until that point. So it's me having to wear all these different hats and be like, oh, you got to just keep the rhythm going, but at least make it interesting. Don't just sit there and, you know, you can't just bar chord it all the time, which I wouldn't do anyway. But then it's like other comments were like, well, whenever you go into the leads, it's like there's no rhythm guitar, and it just kind of like it's leads and bass. So that was the originally thing for live, to have someone to kind of fill that in. But then it became like, well, bring this person in full time, and then that allows us to take full advantage of two guitar players, whether it's like, you know, us doing different chord voicings and just making the sound bigger and just giving everything's a lot more, not technical complexity necessarily. I mean, in certain cases, yes, but just a much more interesting sound and a lot deeper tones. You know, I could really jump into the atmospheric vibey stuff, you know, a lot more, and not be concerned with like recreating that live with only one guitar player, or, you know, if I was to do that part live, you know, certain parts live, it's like, well, there's no brutal to it. There's no rhythm under there. It's just like, you know, because now I can do that because there's someone else doing the rhythm, or me laying back and doing the rhythm and him doing some other stuff. So, you know, it's it's worked out the way that there's these two voices that kind of, you know when to stay out of each other's way kind of thing, you know, but for the betterment of the song, you know.
Yeah. So this is the first record since the Before times. How
Yes.
long into that dark period did you guys start
Mhm.
working on this record? I mean, because we've all had like a year and a half, 2 years to like sit around and do nothing.
Yeah.
How different was it versus the way you guys normally create?
Well, yeah, we usually, because Death Atlas came out November 29th, 2019. So usually the plan to be, okay, the record comes out, tour for a year and a half, 2 years, and then take 8 months to a year off to write. Well, that's already kind of had a wrench thrown in it because of, like you want to release all your physical media at the same time. Well, vinyl pressing plants have huge backlogs. So what used to be you hand in your record and then 3 months later, oh, it's out, became, oh, you hand in it later and then 5 months it's out. And now with a lot of these backlogs based on COVID and not, it's 8, 9 months sometimes. So that's the extreme end of it, but it's just like, okay, you have to factor that into your time between records. So we did one North American tour after the record came out. We were in Australia, New Zealand, Japan in February of 2020. And, right maybe a week before we left, we were like, oh, this is we still cool to go over there? Yeah, okay, all right. So we're over there touring and, we're watching the news, keeping an eye on everything. And we get like I get emails from our families like, honey, you want to make sure that you have an out because this could get really serious really quick and you don't want to be trapped in Australia for however long. I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, it could be trapped worse places, but yeah, definitely. So, by the time we got to Japan, which was the last stop, we had 2 days in Tokyo, we get off our plane and
The hammer
there's
dropped.
2 lines. There's one that's like, oh, normal immigration, go over here and have your passport stamp. And then there's the left that had, this sign in like 5 different languages. It was like, have you felt feverish or, a little odd or off or headaches or unexplained, respiratory issues? Come see our medical professional. So it's like, you probably have COVID line. But there was no like, it was just like, you feel weird? Let's go over there. It's fine. There was no like disciplines, no test or nothing. It was just like casual. And then we did the shows, we came back. And then we actually ended up having the second to last flight that was allowed out of Japan before they shut off travel. So that was close. I mean, we planned it ahead of time. So it wasn't like we had to scramble to find the last flight, but it was still like, oof, we just last got out of there. So then, we get back to San Diego and it's like, oh, maybe July, August, this will be done, whatever. Well, about June of that year, we're like, this isn't gonna be done anytime soon. So we really had to reassess. We're like, well, I know our album just came out the end of November last year, but maybe we should start casually writing. So we did, and it took a while, to get kind of really started because you're just not in that mindset, it's kind of like it's like, you're as a musician, you're like never not writing, I guess, to a certain extent, but to get into these sort of, we're all in there together, there's this tension, palpable kind of like push-pull of ideas. I don't think all of us were prepared for that yet, but we started and, myself and our bass player live internationally for the writing of this record. So there was a lot of, even during COVID, traveling to San Diego to have writing sessions. So we'd set up something once a month. Everyone flies in, you have 3 or 4 days of pounding it out, and then you return to your home and do your homework or whatever you can do, whether it's work or whatever. Reconvene. So it's just, it got put together over the course of like maybe a little over a year. And yeah, that's somehow that happened.
Do you find that extra time was a benefit versus having to like be on that machine of let's grind?
Well, it's like, I don't know, like in the past, like that was, Death Atlas was written, Dave was living in Seattle again, but he'd come down like once or twice a month to work on that. But, that was written with everyone else in San. Well, Oli is living in Montreal, but that record, he was kind of more like almost telecommuting, basically we'd show him parts and whatever. But so we were all in San Diego. So that one seemed like a little more normal. But with this record, like, you know, that Death Atlas was like, go to work, come home, work on your stuff. We practice X amount of times a week or whatever, or whenever Dave's down, whatever. But with this, it was like we really had to schedule things. So those 3 or 4 days at a time were super precious. So it's like we had a ton of time, but not a lot of time together. And we're very much a writing in person with each, you know, face-to-face sort of band. Yeah, of course, we would send each other riffs and parts, you know, oh, check this out. I came up with this riff and all that. But we're very much we're in person, we're staring at each other. There's that, you know,
Yeah.
creative tension, push-pull kind of thing going on. It's like at the time it sucks, but it's never not going to suck. It's never one of those, oh, we're used to this. Where no, it all sucks, but you get the best results out of that, unfortunately. So that's the way we write. So it was, you know, there was that extra time, but I think because of the situation with traveling, it felt like a normal, like, all right, guys, we got to get in here and do this, you know, cram. Okay, go home. Okay, cram, you know. So it was kind of a wrought with stress, you know, as they usually are. So it wasn't that much different. But the next writing cycle, I mean, who knows? There's always a new extenuating circumstance every time we come into a record. So I don't know what the new one's going to be, but please hope there's nothing else. And we can barely get ourselves like all the same place at once anyway. So
yeah. I just hope nothing lyrically related to any of your song titles happens next time.
Yes.
That was really, ironically, it was just comical. So I gotta say, like, the new record, Terrasite.
Yes.
A cover is beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I know it's a really polarizing thing. People like, because it's not blatant death metal brutal and, you know, there's not like a dead guy or something on it. They're like, but it's really cool. It's like,
there is, but not really.
Yeah. It's like a departure for us color wise. I mean, it's almost like a, you know, I mean, what are the main colors on it? Yeah, there's a little grass, kind of a green coming through, but there's like a charcoal, but then the rest of it's like pink, lavender, maybe a little yellow, white, like sunlighty kind of thing. So it's not exactly like, where do you don't have these typical death metal covers or colors. So it's like, it's bright. So like we're gonna have to work for merch. Figure out what's going on.
Yeah, that was one of the things you guys do best, is like, you guys are one of my favorites because you guys sing about the non-normal stuff. You know, it's like maybe there might have been a super death metal-y old school, like, I'm gonna chop you in half because it's murder. You know, you guys haven't done that in a very long time, or at all. I can't remember at this minute, but
yeah,
you guys keep it interesting. You know, like I hate the term. I've heard this term before in regards to other certain bands, like, oh, you guys are the thinking man's death metal, but it's like, you know, but it's like, it's kind of true, because like, you guys to me always know how to end records. Like, you guys always end records super strong. Like, ever since the Harvest Floor, like the end of the Harvest Floor, that's like the song that I just like to put on repeat, because that has a dreary feel to it. And for me, nostalgia. That could have been the ending for me. I was like, oh, this is perfect. This is to me, it was like a double ending record.
Song.
Yeah,
it does have a last song feel, but nope, there's this 10-minute song at the end now.
And they're both great. It's like, oh wow, I could like put these two songs on repeat. It's like, I just want to be in the dark and just loop this ending part over and over. And I found those parts, those endings are just beautiful endings. I find your sequencing is you guys spend a lot of time on sequencing these records, because it's not a sonically boring record. It's not like there's all this aggression up front. You know, you can listen to this whole record and you're still like, all right, I'm not exhausted.
Yeah, and that's a bit, thank you. But we do definitely spend a ton of time agonizing over song order and the proper ways to kind of like, you know, like if there's production elements like fading into or ending tracks and stuff like that, to where it just complements whatever's coming after, or if there's the end of the record, just how to end it, you know, properly. It's like, all of us have had records where it's like, oh, there's some really good songs on this, but it seems more like, oh, here's some songs put together. We had X amount of songs at one time, we're putting these together. It's like, we definitely like love records that's like, oh, you can listen to beginning to end and it feels like this singular statement that kind of goes through. So it's like, we really agonized over song order and sequencing and everything, and just production that supports the strength of that. So I'm glad people notice that, you know, because we spend a lot of time on it, especially now when everything's very single oriented. And that's seemingly, I don't say a lost art, but just kind of like less important, you know. It's like, okay, here's 10 or, you know, X amount of songs on a record, and we'll just tie it together with some feedback or just spooky noises or whatever. It's like we want to very much like, this song has these characteristics. Let's, you know, really explore how to most properly order everything. So, you know, the precursor, the post, the actual song is all amplified and complemented by whatever comes before and after.
In a way, with the singles, you guys have worked with Dave Brodsky, like on the last, at least on your last 2 videos and a few before that. What attracts you to his work, and what does he bring to you that brings out the best out of you guys?
Yeah, it was like we had tried to, you know, we just kind of could never line up. Like we tried to work with him in the past, like over the years, and it was always one of the names that would always come up, like, oh man, you should go to Brodsky. And we're like, oh, we'd love to, but it was just, you know, his schedule, our schedule, whatever, it just never really worked out. Well, we finally got it, you know, for over the, we have 3 videos that he's done right now, and he's going to do another for us coming up here in a few weeks.
Nice.
And so it's, yeah, we'll have, 4 by then, but it's really like, you know, we've always been attracted to like that the quality is there, and he has a great eye for effects, and, you know, he can create a lot out of seemingly little, you know, as far as like, you know, that's always the way with like, you get into those environments and you show up, if you're, you know, I'm not in that world at all. So I'm like, how the heck how are they going to get this end result out of this? You know, there's a couple palettes and like some guy with a light, like doing this over in the corner, you know, whatever. And then you see the finished product, and not even counting like, you know, post effects, like digital stuff, but just like, here's the scene and all this. You're like, that's incredible. It's just the eye for it, and just knowing just having that sort of that intuition on how to like do things, whether it's angles or just lighting. It's looks incredible, and he's just fantastic with that. Him and all of his team and his wife are just amazing, you know. Yeah. So they're both great and they're great to work with too. It's like another one of those things. They have a great manner to them. They have great senses of humor, and they, you know, make that, which kind of can be, you know, I'm not going to complain about making music videos, because that's a total musician like thing to complain about, but it could be a pain in the ass, because you're sitting there like, how many takes of like, well, I gotta look like I'm rocking out like I've never rocked out before, and you know, you're sitting there just, I don't have hair, so I'm just sitting here like for, you know, how many hours. And they make it so it's not as agonizing, and their product is great, you know. So the first 2, you know, the Scourge of the Offspring and Weed Our Young, they really nailed those, and we have one we're actually kind of going back and forth with right now on little edits, and, you know, if we have any personal requests on what we want to see more or less of and everything. So they're working on that right now. So we have one, we'll have another new video via them here in the next few weeks. Very rarely do we say we're excited to do music videos, but it's going to be, we have one that we're going to do when we're on that Dark Funeral tour, that we're going to do up in their neck of the woods, and you know, like northeastern Pennsylvania, right on the border of New York. So yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Maybe I'll see you then.
Yeah, come on up.
Yeah. Also, let's see, before we wrap this up, since you've been back at it since the world reopened, when did you feel comfortable as a musician playing live again? Like when did it feel like my chops are good, I feel comfortable, but I'm not 100% there yet? When was that moment for you?
I think, well, we had a tour right at the beginning of 2022, I think February, March, that, you know, we were just like super cautious when we got back. Just like, okay, we're wearing masks and all the the venues, and, you know, obviously abiding whatever local rules there are, and just being not shut-ins, but kind of shut-ins, you know, on a lot of it. And you know, we were very fortunate, you know, for the most part on, you know, health, staying healthy. But I mean, I felt fairly comfortable during that tour playing wise. But I think the tour we did back in the Amon Amarth tour on back in November, December, that's like, granted we had a short set because we were opening, but, you know, that was very much just like, all right, you know, you're just back into it, you're comfortable, you know. So this, you know, this tour we have upcoming too, we can hopefully, you know, we get enough time to practice in San Diego, we'll just step on stage in Santa Ana the first show and just, you know, have, you know, those, you get the first night jitters kind of thing. You have a few songs where it's like, but then you just get right back into it. So and it usually only takes like a few shows to kind of really just get comfortable. So, and that's just, been doing this for so long, you kind of have that initial jitters and then you get on it. So hopefully it'll come quickly.
All right. So since you're from Chicago, you were in this band called 7,000 Dying Rats.
Yes.
With Weasel Walter.
Yes.
Yes, I'm friends with Weasel too. And I was doing my research and I was like, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
How was that project?
That was one of the funnest bands I've ever been in. Like, the guys in that band are absolutely great. I joined it in, I think, 1997. I was in it for like 3 years or so before I moved to San Diego. But yeah, I lived in Chicago I'm from downstate Illinois. Can't even say the name of my own state. Downstate Illinois. Grew up down there, but then I lived in Chicago for college and after for several years and everything. So I was in like 5 or 6 bands there. And 7,000 was, they were parting ways with their bass player and drummer at the time. And they only had one guitar player because half the band, I think most of the band was in Chicago at the time, and a few guys were in Detroit. So they kind of asked me like, well, do you want to fill in, all the stuff the other guys can't do? And they can't really do much because they have really full-time jobs and careers. So you'll pretty much be one of the guys. I'm like, yeah, sure. So yeah, we recorded a couple this cat is really loud.
Oh, it's fine.
Yeah, recorded a couple
dogs.
Yeah, recorded a couple full lengths and did some touring, and it was just a blast. And Weasel joined probably like the last year and a half I was in the band. So we did a bunch of shows and it was fun. I mean, I saw him with Ludenbachers a bajillion times, and Hate Wave when he had that band going.
Yeah,
and
Cellular Chaos.
Yeah, Cellular Chaos. And I mean to hit him up more, because I'm always like, well, I know he's like back and forth between, he was in New York and then Philly, and I know his family in Rockford where he's from, so I know he kind of commutes here and there. For a while, he's going back and forth all the time. Yeah. So I don't know, is he still in New York right now, or is he somewhere? Last
time I looked, he was in Chicago. But I talked
he's
to
actually
him
back in Chicago. Okay.
Yeah, I talked to him like the other month, and I was like, dude, we need to. Because he's like very little social presence. I was like, you got like 85 bands, bro. Come on, me help you.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to, now I know he's back in Chicago, I'll have to hit him up before we're there. Come and ask if he wants to come out, because I'd love to see him. Yeah. I tried a couple times in New York, but it was always like, he goes, oh, dude, I got like 3 shows that night. I'm just like, he was just get on the subway, boom, get on the subway, go to the next one and stuff. So I understand where he's busy. So it'd be great to see him again.
Okay. Yeah. I'll remind him.
Yeah, that'd be great. I don't remember the day we're in Chicago, but yeah.
All right. The real last question. What do you want people to take away from this new record?
I want cats. I just I want them just appreciate the hopefully just like a refinement of what the direction we've been going. And just like kind of you mentioned too, is like there's a lot more of like a sort of like you mentioned, like say Soulstalgia and Just Another Body, there's this like kind of like textural depth to the songs that you can really just kind of get immersed in, and just like you said, turn down the lights and just sit there. And that's a great compliment for me, in the band. So I want people to have that same type of experience and be able to, because that's obviously something I'm going to go to this record for, that, not just turn it on to like, oh, I like extreme metal or whatever music you like, just have it on. It's just like, you're going to that record for that. And if we could provide that thing for someone, then that's all I ask for.
Cool. Great, man. Well, dude, thank you so much for your time, man. I know you're a busy guy. Like, I appreciate you taking this time to talk with us. And hopefully I'll see you in New York.
Yeah, come on out. I think it's Irving Plaza or something like that. Cool. Yeah, come out and say hello, and we'll have a beer or something.
It'll be good to catch up, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was great seeing you, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon, brother.
Yeah, cool. Take it easy.